Hello, I'm Mark Tallman with the Kansas Association of School Boards. This program is to help you understand how public education works in the state of Kansas, how we got here, some of the issues that we're confronting, the progress we've seen in education in Kansas, and the challenges that still remain. We hope you find this interesting and can contact us with further questions you may have. In the first part of our presentation on Kansas public education, we're going to look at the system itself, what the Kansas Constitution says, how public schools are managed at the local level, characteristics of students, staff, and school district budgets. Article 6 of the Kansas Constitution addresses education. It was last amended in 1966. The very first section, the very first line say, the legislature shall provide for intellectual, educational, vocational, and scientific improvement by establishing and maintaining public schools and other educational institutions and activities. So the key message of the state constitution is its purpose for education is improvement, and the mechanism is through public schools. The Kansas Constitution divides responsibility for public education among three bodies. First, a 10-member state board of education, each elected in districts throughout the state, which shall have general supervision of the public schools. It sets goals, accountability standards, and accreditation for students and schools. The second set of responsibilities are given to local school boards. The Constitution says that local public schools under the general supervision of the state board shall be maintained, developed, and operated by locally elected boards. So those local boards use state, local, and federal funding to operate and address state, local, and federal requirements and goals. Third, the Constitution gives the Kansas legislature the responsibility to make suitable provision for finance of the education interests of the state. That means the legislature determines the system of funding for public schools, and it also passes laws on school operations and finance. The governor's role is to sign or veto those actions. The constitutional duty to maintain, develop, and operate local schools is currently exercised through 286 unified school districts in the state, each providing kindergarten through 12th grade, each under a 7-member locally elected board with staggered 4-year terms. Each board is elected in nonpartisan elections in odd-numbered years with other local officers, as opposed to even-numbered years when county, state, and federal officers are elected. The exception is Fort Leavenworth School District, entirely on a military base, which has 3 members appointed by the base commander and no high school. It's important to note that virtually all districts participate in interlocal agreements or cooperatives and service centers to provide things like special education, joint purchasing, professional developments, and local districts may share staff and programs. Like many other boards you might be thinking of, school boards manage the district by hiring staff, setting policies, approving contracts, and adopting budgets within the limits set by the state. But there are many other more unique responsibilities of school boards. First, they are education providers and must carry out specific educational requirements and duties set by the state board and the legislature. School boards are also employers, and they must follow laws regarding employment, benefits, and employee rights, and specific requirements for working with teachers through teacher contracts set by the state. Boards are also local governments. They must follow laws regarding elections and open meetings, provide open records data, set taxes, and provide and comply with a number of publications requirements. Finally, school boards have a kind of judicial role. They often have to hear appeals in cases such as student discipline and personnel matters. Next, let's look at the students that public schools have to educate. Public school enrollment in Kansas was relatively stable from 1993 to the mid-2000s, but in the last 15 to 20 years, enrollment has increased by about 50,000 students. The biggest change is how Kansas students have become more racially and ethnically diverse. White students have gone from about 85% of the population in 1993 to about 65% in 2020. Non-white students have historically had more challenges for student success. Just as Kansas schools are educating many more non-white students, They are also educating more low-income students. The number of Kansas students eligible for free or reduced price meals has increased about 57% since 2000, and low-income students traditionally have more difficulty reaching academic benchmarks. Another student group that has been rising faster than overall enrollment is special education, which increased from a little over 50,000 students in the year 2000 to almost 80,000 in 2020. Under state and federal law, these students who have disabilities or under state law, gifted students require additional services for them to benefit from the educational system. It's difficult to calculate exactly what percent of Kansas school-age children attend public schools because only public and accredited private schools are required to report enrollment. The U.S. Census estimates there are about 519,000 Kansans between ages 5 and 17. Removing preschool students and removing 50% of high school seniors, because not all students are between ages 5 and 15, KASB estimates that public schools educate about 89.4% of this age group. Accredited private schools about 5%, and the rest attend non-accredited private schools, home schools, or are not attending school. Now let's look at the functions public schools actually do to meet the needs of their students. First, of course, is instruction. This is direct teaching or interaction of students and student activities by teachers, paraprofessionals, and also includes such things as classroom supplies. Next, school districts provide support for students not directly related to teaching through things like health programs, counseling, social work, attendance, and special education services such as speech pathology and audiology. Another category is called instructional support. This includes the school's library or media center, the professional development to continue to help teachers improve how they teach, testing and assessment of students, and support for instructional technology. Of course, every school has at least one principal, operates a school office to not only work with students in things such as activities and discipline, but to support students and lead the operation of the building. Districts also provide transportation to hundreds of thousands of students every day, not only to school, but to school activities, and in some cases provide transportation for shared teachers who work among several buildings or districts. And districts operate food service programs for students, including both breakfast and lunch, and often case snacks, as part of overall nutritional programs. Of course, all of these activities need a place to happen. Operations and maintenance includes district activities for heating, cooling, lighting, and cleaning, school buildings and facilities, the cost of insurance, and security. School districts, of course, have to construct those facilities, and this area includes building, remodeling equipment, and the acquisition of land or other buildings to provide space for these activities. Sometimes districts can cover the cost of facilities through ongoing resources such as capital outlay, but in many cases, school districts issue construction bonds and pay the cost of that debt over time. District administration includes the superintendent and other activities to provide leadership to the entire district, including such things as legal services. And finally, central services includes activities such as payroll, the business office, human resources, and supplies. It should be noted that in small districts, many of these activities are shared by different functions and may not be a separate office, but these are the activities that all public schools are involved in. How do districts allocate their funding to address these different functions? Well, statewide, about 53% of all funding goes directly to instruction, and another 20% goes to support students and teachers, which means almost three-quarters of all funding is directly spent on students and teachers and the service to support them. About 22% goes for construction, including debt service and the operation of those school buildings. Less than 5% is spent on general administration and central services. Another way of looking at how school districts spend funding is how much goes to people, how much goes to purchase things, and how much goes to debt. Nearly 80% of school funding goes to people, the rest go to materials and buildings. About two-thirds of all funding is paid directly to district employees as salaries and benefits. About 13% goes to people employed by others or self-employed through school district contracting, what's called purchase services. 12% goes for supplies, everything from materials to cleaning supplies, and about 10% goes to paying off debt, mostly for school construction bonds. In addition to annual expenditures, school districts keep cash on hand each year and throughout the year. July 1st cash balances have for the past several years been about 30% of total expenditures and gradually increasing, but most of those funds have been restricted for purposes like bond payments, capital outlay where districts may accumulate dollars for large purchases, and insurance reserves. All of those have also been rising. Unrestricted operating balances, those things which really act as a contingency fund for the school district, are about 10% of total spending and have been gradually declining over the past 10 years. Districts have cash reserves for three main purposes: for unexpected contingencies, for cash flow during the year, because districts' expenses and income don't always line up, and to save for long-term projects. Because most school funding is spent on personnel, as funding has increased over the time, the number of school district employees have also increased. Since 1998, school districts have added almost 13,000 positions, an increase of 22%. But at times when funding has been reduced, school district positions were also reduced. Of the school employee positions added since 1998, 70% have been teachers, teachers' aides, and paraprofessionals for special education, working directly with students. Part of the increase in paraprofessionals and teacher aides has been when districts haven't been able to find enough teachers in particular areas. Districts have also added a number of positions in areas supporting students, such as counselors, nurses, and social workers, or supporting teachers, such as library media centers, and especially areas like technology support, as districts have added many more technology programs. General administration and central service staff has actually been reduced in numbers since 1998. One way to compare Kansas school staffing with other states is to look at the number of positions in different categories per thousand students. Based on the most recent data from 2017 and 18, Kansas has more teachers, teacher aides, principals, and student support staff based on the number of students than the U.S. average, and fewer district office and all other staff. Compared to neighboring and other plain states, Kansas has more teachers per thousand students, about the same number of principals and student support staff, and fewer district office staff and all other positions. While Kansas has more teachers than most other states based on its population of students, Kansas teacher salaries are about $10,000 below the U.S. average, and since 2010 have fallen below the regional average of neighboring and plain states. Nationally, when adjusted for inflation, teacher salaries have been basically flat since 1990. But Kansas teacher salaries have declined by about 5% since 1990, while the average of neighboring and Plains region states have increased by about 5%.